Hey everybody, welcome back. Episode 3 of Uniquely Unqualified Podcast. We have one subject that we're going to discuss today. Real quick, today is Monday, February 23rd, 2026. Yesterday was Sunday, February 22nd, 2026. Today we are going to discuss Mexico and what happened yesterday, Sunday. But before we get into any of that, please click like and subscribe. Helps me out a whole bunch. Like I said at the end of the last one, doesn't really mean a whole bunch to you, but it means a world to me. So please like and subscribe to this channel, and we'll get into it. So, first things first, yesterday, El Mencho Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was killed by Mexican forces yesterday in a raid on his house in Jalisco, south of Guadalajara. So everybody's been seeing that Puerto Vallarta is on fire and Guadalajara is on fire. Many states are shut down right now, but we here where I'm at, we're largely unaffected. So I would like to start off with yesterday I was receiving a bunch of phone calls from family members and friends from the States. And they were just basically under the assumption that the entire country is under siege and oh my God, what's happening down in Mexico? Well, I would like to explain that not too long ago, just a month or so ago, in a place called Minnesota, in Minneapolis, we had a city burning. Nobody in Mexico or friends from Canada or people that I know in Australia or England or Romania called me asking if everything was okay in Boise, Idaho, while Minnesota was burning. Equally, back in the day in Los Angeles during the Watts riots, you know, a Canadian friend from Manitoba wouldn't call somebody somewhere in Illinois being concerned about a city burning 1,000 miles away in California. So I would just really quickly like to make reference to the fact that Guadalajara is about an 8 to 10 hour drive away from where we are. It's about an hour plane ride. Puerto Vallarta, depending on the route that you take, is a 10 to 13 hour drive away from us. Down here where we're at in Guerrero, there is very little news about cities burning. We here are on a little bit of a, safety stand down. Nothing was shut down officially. There were a couple of checkpoints in and out and throughout the city yesterday in the evening as people were coming in and out. No big deal, passed through 2 of them, but that's not really abnormal at any rate. And then today I was just told, lay low, make sure everything's fine. But I was explained this morning by a very close friend of mine that everything is really calmed down and we're not under a bunch of we're not under any kind of watch or nothing's going to happen to us here. So let's go ahead and explain real quick. El Mencho died in a helicopter after he attempted to flee his ranch with security. Mexican forces caught up with him, shot him somewhere outside in the woods near his ranch, got him in a helicopter. He died in the helicopter on the way to Guadalajara. El Mencho is was the leader of the internationally infamous CJNG, Cartel de Jalisco Nuevo Generación, Jalisco New Generation Cartel to the English speakers. It is said by both American officials and the president here in Mexico, President Sheinbaum Pardo, that this was a federal Mexican operation aided with intelligence by the United States. Both parties are claiming that this was there were no U.S. boots on ground, and this was solely undertaken by the Mexican military, I believe the army. Many Guardia Nacional troops were killed yesterday. I wasn't able to dig up too much info on how many Ejército, or the army. I don't know how many of those were killed yesterday, nor about the Marines, the Marinas. As far as corruption goes in those outfits, you have the Mexican Marines, which are the highest level of training and vetting. They are considered an elite force with the minimal amount of corruption in the ranks. The Army is second to the Marines. National Guard is third, followed by Policía Estatal, the police of the state, the federales. Those are the most corrupt, and then you can come down to the local levels. Anyway, so we do know that numerous National Guard folks got killed in this operation. I was listening to recordings of Nemesio Cervantes talking to top police officials on cell phone, basically cussing them out, telling them, "Do you know who I am? I'm gonna hunt you down and I'll kill your dog." And if they're gonna tell you that they killed a dog, that means that your wife, your kids, your whole family's done. If they're coming after your dog, that's what the messaging that sends. Anyway, so the U.S. involvement wasn't minimal by any means, as you know, high-level surveillance and reconnaissance was awarded by the United States to Mexico for this operation. Now, I would like to start this next part of my list here. I came prepared with many notes, so if I am staring down at my paper, that would be why. I'm trying to keep myself on track, because this is really important to me. So I would like to say, I am not a professional, I am not an expert, I am merely an observer. I live in a place where these people move around, run the show, they live in my neighborhood, they control sections of the government, etc. I do not have any, I am not a reporter. I don't go and interview these people on camera. I have been here in Mexico for many years, and I really enjoy the mountains and the rivers and the river communities and in the lowlands closer to our elevation here next to the ocean. And over the years, I've developed friendships, gained trust, and many of these people have allowed me a glimpse in on their lifestyle and what they do. So having said that, that's gonna be my first qualifier for what I'm doing, talking about this right now. The second qualifier I'll say is I have been fascinated with the Mexican drug cartels for years, decades. My fascination first started when I was in high school, and I went to a place called, many high schools, but I went to a high school in the San Fernando Valley called Van Nuys High School. Fast Times at Ridgemont High was filmed there. I ran the track, the benches are made of the same wood when I was in high school as they were when the movie was filmed. At the time when I was going to Van Nuys High School, I was one of 2 or 3 American white kids in the high school, not including it was like a GATE program. It was a gifted thing that high school had. One of the best in California. One of the worst schools, but one of the best gifted programs in the Los Angeles Unified School District at the time. So I had to make friends with the Hispanics and the blacks. There weren't very many black kids. Most of them played basketball and played for the football team. But by and large, it was Mexican and other Latino heritage, Hispanics. And I was a little pudgy white kid, and so I was kind of a rough go for a little while. But after you prove to be cool, they ease up on you. So when I would go to some of my friends' apartments, and we're talking in parts of Van Nuys that have been trashed for a long time, very, very uncomfortable, very dangerous parts of the San Fernando Valley. We'd skip school, or even on the weekends, I would just go over to my friends' apartments, and you'd walk into these dumpy, sketchy apartment complexes, and I would go into my Mexican or Honduran or El Salvadorian or Guatemalan or wherever his family was from. I would walk into their apartment, and it was like walking into a Macy's or a Bon Marché, or just the furniture, the clothes they wore, the smells that came out, the leather, the TVs, the entertainment, the sound systems, everything. It was kind of bonkers. It was really cool. These kids were, they were undocumented. Their parents were illegals. They didn't have legitimate work, let's say, but they were making money. And you could imagine what these parents, young parents, were making money supplying a life like that for their kids. Lots of it was drugs, lots of it was gang activity. A few friends that I had in high school were actual gangsters. One of them even was required by the court to be in school. And so he was just physically there. The only thing he participated in was PE. And that's even limited as far as participation. This guy was a hardcore gangster, and he just kind of took me under his wing as an in-school friend, and we would hang out on Cedros Avenue, Kester, down in that area, and I would see this guy sling drugs at school, sling drugs in the streets. I would watch fist fights and brawls, and it was a very, very interesting culture. I really kind of appreciated it, to be completely honest with you. Pardon, I got to mark this off here, right? So, that's really where my fascination with this subject started. Over the years, audiobooks, documentaries, the news, living down here in Guerrero, being really involved with the community, educated to the local area from some of the Sanka down here, the original folks, the locals. They give me a roadmap. They tell me what all this stuff is about. Anyway, so fast forward all that fascination and fast forward that to El Chapo. Let's start with El Chapo and his importance up north, near the border. I have a neighbor here on my street, up the hill and across the street. Great guy, love him, great kids, great family. He's kind of old guard, as they would say. He's a Sinaloa sympathizer. Sinaloa the group, the cartel itself, has been propagandized in the United States to the American people as the biggest thing since sliced bread when it comes to organized crime south of the border. The Sinaloa cartel has been a smoldering ember of what it once was for 10 to 15 years now. So, and it started before El Chapo was arrested and shipped to the States. It started with a fighting arm of the Sinaloa cartel called the Mata Zetas, the Zeta Killers. It is rumored by a few people that are in the know, in the former traffickers, felons that have come out and explained why they're so powerful, how they're so dangerous, etc. One man came out not a long time ago, let's call it a year ago. His name, I believe, was Pierre Rousini, and he came out on the Ironclad channel on the show Borderlands and claimed that there are four former United States Special Forces operators, 2 Navy SEALs, 1 unit guy, Delta Force, and a Ranger, who essentially trained the fighting force that is what we today know as CJNG. So the Mata Zetas essentially broke away from Sinaloa because what's Sinaloa going to do? Mata Zetas was the fighting arm for Sinaloa. And so instead of just taking control of everything, they peacefully separated, and Mata Zetas eventually became Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and has grown to what we know today. El Mencho was the notorious leader of that. There is a gentleman, I believe now came out yesterday afternoon, not hours after, just hours after the death of El Mencho was mentioned, and I'm not so sure of his real name, but I believe that they call him El Yogurt. He's a very pale-faced Mexican man. Maybe we can make a connection to the 4 U.S. former Special Forces operators training these guys. And a very pale-faced Spanish-speaking man steps up behind a camera and says that he is now the controlling person for the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. But we'll see. Where was I going with that? So, Jalisco New Generation was registered under the Trump administration as an international terrorist group. I would like to say that I am personally fed up with the concept of the war on drugs. I'm sick and tired of, it's the heroin in Afghanistan, it's the fentanyl in Mexico and China, it's all that. You're never going to stop it. Stop filling people's heads with, we got to stop these drugs coming in if they don't come in from the southern border, they're coming from the northern border. If they don't come in from the northern border, they're going to come in from the east coast. They're going to come in from the west coast. You shut that down, it's going to come from Tennessee. It's going to come from Montana. It's going to come from Wyoming. You're never going to stop it. So the smart thing is legalization and regulation. That's the intelligent move. The people that do drugs are going to continue to do drugs upon legalization, and the people that do not do drugs won't do drugs even if they're legalized. So you're really not, it doesn't tip the scale one way or the other. A drug addict's a drug addict, a sober person's a sober person. That's how it goes. That's how human beings generally operate. There's very, very small margins that say, oh, well, I never smoked weed my whole life because it's always been illegal. Well, now that it's legal, now I'll try it. Okay, well, there for the grace of God go they. However, by and large, legalizing drugs is the correct answer. You legalize it, you regulate it, you tax it. Anyway, so as I said, I think I said it in the last episode or the first episode, whichever one. There was an idea floated out by U.S. Congress to basically invade Mexico and fight the cartels. Big no-no. You don't do that to your neighbor. If you've got a problem with your neighbor's dog shitting in your yard, you put up a damn fence on your side of the yard so the neighbor's dog doesn't shit in your yard. You don't kick the dog, you don't shoot the dog, you don't, if your neighbor is smoking weed or banging too many girls and you don't like it in their house, and you take it upon yourself to cross their boundary, go in their door and dictate to them how they live their life, that's wrong. Going into Mexico to solve any problem in Mexico is the exact same concept. And I disagree with basically any U.S. intervention anywhere in the world right now. We have proven to be piss poor at it as far as the policies that put us in these positions to do regime change or spend 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, and billions and trillions of dollars spent for literally no reason. I asked this question last week: who's in charge of Afghanistan now? So that's how successful the United States was in Afghanistan. Full failure. And I'm telling you right now, I live down here. Mexico is primarily a mountainous country. We got the desert to the north, then you come down further south and it's mountains. And I would strongly advise that any U.S. intervention in this region would be another catastrophe, just the same as in Vietnam, just the same as in Afghanistan. The topography is the same, and these people live here in this heat, and they jump around, and they move around, and they know their tunnel systems, they know their alley systems, they know their trail systems, they know. You can do a lot of reconnaissance, you can do a lot of surveillance, but it's 2026, and they have that equipment too. So you might know where they are, but they definitely know where you are too. Anyway, largely in Afghanistan, the Taliban didn't have drones. They didn't have ISR. They had flashlights that they would click to communicate if there's a platoon moving into the area. They would flash them on the hills, on the rooftops, whatever, in the nighttime. They had binoculars. They would camp out at elevated positions, and they would radio down to say, hey, this is where they are. They're coming in, blah. Well, now a very sophisticated group like Jalisco New Generation Cartel, they have drones with gimbal cameras. They have drones with the capability to carry explosives. They have drones with the capability to carry small guns on them. They have these things. I'll get into how I know this in a minute. But anyway, so I think that it would be, if you want to see a real big problem south of the border, go head to head with the cartels, because even though they might fight between themselves without foreign intervention, you give them a common enemy to go against, and you're going to have the Gulf Cartel, which is not nearly as big as Jalisco New Generation, but they are as outfitted as they are, and you're going to have every other little faction coming together and uniting against U.S. forces. And if you think President Sheinbaum Pardo who's a Morena party. If you think she's compromised by the cartel now, and if you think the cartel has anything to do with politics here in Mexico, you bring United States soldiers and force into this country, and they will end up taking the whole country. They will kick the U.S. fighting force out, and they will take the country. And it's not worth it to your neighbor. It's not worth it to the people of Mexico. It's not worth it to the hundreds of thousands of expats from the U.S. and Canada that live here. You can't be doing this. The U.S. cannot do that here. We can't. I'll get into what the whole the death of El Mencho means here in a little bit. But anyway, staying on track here. So I live in Mexico. I've been living here for quite a while now. I've been coming in and out many times a year since 2020. I've been a legal resident down here for 3 years now, and I've lived here paying rent in a house and living life down here for 2 straight years, though I am back in the United States anywhere from 2 to 4 times out of the year. So I'm not going to give up any secrets of anybody I know. But when I first came down here to Guerrero in this little fishing village, I fell in love with this place immediately. And I told my wife, we need to pack it up and figure out how to live here as soon as possible. And one of the things that I was told first thing when we moved here was, you can't go up in the mountains. You can't go on hikes. Yeah, there's rivers, but they're dangerous. Yada, 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 yada. Well, I've been to some dangerous spots in the planet, and I really like the mountains. And so it took me from 2020, 3 trips later, into 2021 or 2022. So it was less than 2 years after coming to this area, but I was here many times in the span of in just under 2 years. We had been here at least 4 or 5 times, a week to 2 weeks at a time, and I wanted up in these mountains. But we've all watched the documentaries and the YouTubes and everything about how, it's cartel country up in the mountains. That's where these guys are. That's the bad people. And there's villages up in there that have a horrible stigma still to this day. Locals are very, very afraid of the area going around there. You're not supposed to do it. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. So I started thinking to myself, how do I get up there? Well, you get up there by finding the guy that's allowed to go up there. And the people at the time that were allowed to go up there were you could tell who they were. They were flashy. Call them a buchon, a boss. So I found a guy, and I worked on him for almost 2 years, showing up when I said that I would be here, bringing his family gifts and bringing friends and everything, and he would show me pictures of these waterfalls and the rivers, and I would say, oh man, I really want to go there, I really want to go there. So I think about the 4th time that I had talked to him, working on him, he sits down at this restaurant table with us, and he brings his phone out and he shows me his phone, and he says, hey, you remember all these pictures that I showed you? And I said, yes, of course. And he says, be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. We got permission to go up. I'll take you. This is how much it's going to cost. Roger Dodger. So got my foot in the door. So I get in his car the next morning. He charges us a ridiculous amount of money to go up there. I still am not mad about it. And he takes us up to this ranch, and he 2 hours away. So we were an hour and a half on the paved highway, and then you take a right up a dirt road for another 30 minutes. You're just winding back into this ranch and this canyon, and it's lush. It's the jungle. We're down here closer to the equator, and we get to see the little huts and the pigs and the roosters and the community. And this gentleman says to me, he says, "This is the real Mexico." And we pull into what could only be considered as this house where you pull up to it and you say, "Oh, clearly this guy is the person who's in charge or important up here." So we're invited into this man's house, and this man's wife makes us food. We swim in the waterfalls and the river. It was absolutely amazing. My wife and I were actually the very first gringo tourists to go up there in somewhere near a decade or more, and I'm going to get to the reason why. So we're sitting there in his house, and I just hit it off with this man, and it was told to him that my wife and I are from Idaho and we like to camp. And this property owner looks at me and he gets his eyes all big and he says, "Oh, you want to go camping?" And I look at my wife and I say, "Yeah, we love camping." And he says, "You want to go camping tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, maybe not tomorrow, but how about Wednesday or Thursday?" He says, "Okay." So I met this guy one time, a day and a half later. I meet him at the bottom of the hill from our hotel in the bay, and I just follow him up to his house, threw everything to the wind, caution everything, and sent some messages back home saying, "Hey, we're going dark and going to be up in the mountains. This is the time we're going. This is where we're supposed to be. If you don't hear from us in 2 days, then send help." And we had one of the greatest camping trips I've ever had in my life. Even though we're way down south, we get up to elevation where there's pine trees and it's chilly, and we had a great meal. And I slept right in the dirt under the stars. Everybody else had their tents and their blankets, and I just couldn't believe that I was sleeping where I was sleeping. It was so great. I just wanted to be outside. So I wake up in time to see the sunrise, and this man comes out of his tent and joins me. And Gil tells me the story about his brother, and this was I guess 2021. It would be late 2021, and he tells me that his brother was murdered about 3 years before because he was running for government here in Zihuatanejo. When he wanted to be the presidente of the county. We call him the president. It's the mayor, basically. They're in charge of the county. And Zihuatanejo County is pretty decently sized. So it's kind of a big deal, big tourist thing in Ixtapa, Troncones, La Salarita, surfing, fabulous food, everything, right? So this guy wanted to run for mayor, and he was incredibly popular. And a representative from the Morena Party gunned him down downtown Pantla. Pantla is a cute little suburb just up the coast off of a river. Up here, it's about a 15-minute drive away. Great little spot. Brother gets gunned down just because he wants to run for mayor. At this time, there was a cartel running the area. When this man that took me camping told me the story about his brother dying, This man used to be in government, is obviously through nothing other than nepotism, but he's also a very famous name. There's streets named after this man's grandfather down here in this town. Very, very famous family, very famous name, very influential. So the oldest brother dies, and at the hand of political violence. And this man that took me camping is spared and is basically told, you go up to your ranch and you can tend your land and raise your family, but you cannot make any money, you can't go to work, you can't have a business. And so he got shoved up into the mountain, kind of excommunicated because of fucking politics and violence. Now, the killing of this man's brother, last name of Espino, was somewhat for nothing by the Moreno Party, because the Independent Party won that year anyway, and the Independent Party is still in control today here. So after this man's brother gets murdered, years go by, and I'm working on this guy down here in the Bay. I want to get up there. And this flashy dude down here at the Bay basically told me that, this is the first time that they've opened the doors for tourists in many years to go up there. And the reason why is because from the time that his brother was killed to the time where I was actually allowed to go up and meet him and his family on his ranch and make a dear friend, assumably for probably the rest of my life, not a smaller group, but there was a little recon element that came in and caused a ruckus up in this little town called Vallecitos de Zaragoza. There's, if you look at a map of Mexico on Google Maps, you'll see a lot of Vallecitos. This one is called Vallecitos de Zaragoza. Vallecitos means little valley. So this clique that came in and basically gave my friend up in the mountains permission to start bringing people in, known as Cartel de Jalisco Nuevo Generacion. They come in and say, Mr. Espino, your brother was an incredibly important man to us. You're a very important man to us. And we would like to make this area safe for you and your family. And so they go through and they kick those other guys out. They made a mess of Vallecitos. I was actually here. We flew in 1 week after that fight happened up in the mountains. And people had just been back in their homes up in the mountains for 1 week. But what had happened is Jalisco New Generation came in and wiped out the other faction and restored peace and order and cleanliness to Vallecitos. And then they controlled that area up in the mountains. So that kind of begins my personal part of this story. So what I saw when this other faction was in charge of this area, low-end extortion, little thugs with face tattoos and shit. You know, they'd go to the little mom and pop stores and shake them down for their taxes, burn it down, kill them if they don't pay. Bad shit. You know, that was going on. Obviously, they were relegating my friend. There was still a lot of the walls have ears kind of thing going on. You know, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. This group moved in, took over the surrounding mountain area, and just kind of freed up my friend. I watched my friend make money, and he's balling now, like he's doing great. He's not a bad guy. He's not a bad guy like that. He's just an important man. He's a peacekeeper. And he's allowed to write songs. He's an artist. He's allowed to write songs and be in movies and sell his limes and his corn. He's also got other stuff going on up there, as you can imagine. But, you know, this, I kind of started really paying very, very, very close attention to what was known as CJNG and what they were doing down here in Guerrero. El Mencho was famously from Michoacan. Years ago, it was just kind of said that he's trying to move from northern Michoacan to southern Michoacan because it's his home state, hometown, home everything, and he just wants to put it under his control, whatever. By the time those kinds of documentaries come out, that's been long gone, taking control, and they're on to the next state. And we're actually in the northwestern part, or the southwestern part of Guerrero, but it's at the northern part of the border, next to Michoacan, where we are. So, where was I going with this? So, I watched these guys move in, clean up the little mountain town, get the school put back together, get teachers up there, clean up the church, clean up the streets. Grocery stores are insanely stocked. There's carnivals up there, you know, like with Ferris wheels and tilty whirls and zippers and shit. Like they went in and they tore it to pieces, kicking all the bad people out. I'm sure that there was collateral damage. I'm sure the innocent people died. But by and large, they were there to get their enemies out. And the people are not their enemy, contrary to any kind of popular thought or opinion that many gringos, extranjeros, Canadians, whatever they have. The Mexican people are not the direct enemy of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. The other business criminals are. So go in and they destroy this little town. It's not fucking destroyed. It's not rubble. It doesn't look like Gaza. They just shot the piss out of it. Cleared all the other guys out. Cleaned it up. People moved home. They threw a party. Vallecitos has been a very, very quiet, peaceful place ever since. My wife and I have permission to go up there basically whenever we want. We have permission to walk around that town in the dark. We get free pass up there. And you do see stuff. You absolutely see stuff. You see these guys. They're up there. But they're dudes. They're cool. You know, you wave at them, they give you a smile, and they wave back. But they're geared up. They're kitted up. They're killers. They're the real deal. But, you know, I've known a few of those folks in my life as well, so I'm not necessarily scared of that. So that was, 2022, I guess that would be when that happened. So basically what Jalisco did after securing the mountain region in Zihuatanejo County and over Petitlan County, all the way down to Tecpan de Galeana. I forget how you pronounce it, but Tecpan. Shitty little town. City, actually. Not a tourist destination at all. So essentially what they did is they moved into the mountains, and they really slowly put a slow drip of recon assets down here into the bay, because Los Viagras are down here in the bay. The guys that were doing the low end extortion of storefronts and etc. Just bad shit. Blocking roads for water and food deliveries if they don't get money, for just the quintessential basic cartel bullshit you hear about. Jalisco don't roll that way. Cartel de Jalisco Nuevo Generacion does not roll that way. And I will say explicitly, I know this because over the years I have been pleasured to be introduced to some very, very important folks outside of my friend. My wife and I are kind of socialites on both sides of the fence. I have legit friends down here that really don't like that. They like me, but they don't think that that's a very good idea for me to be friends with these folks. However, the rule is you can come up to the line, just don't cross the line. It's as simple as that. They'll feed you, they'll get drunk with you, they'll pull security at the birthday party for you. They're just dudes doing a job. It just so happens to be the job that they're doing. But they've got wives, kids, property, friends, sisters, brothers. They're human beings too. Depending on the amount of training, a United States service member can be a really, really dangerous person as well. But they have a wife and kids. And even after service, let's say, these cartel guys are just dangerous, they're just gangsters, blah. Well, so is a prior U.S. Army Ranger or MARSOC guy who becomes a contractor for hire and goes and smokes people in Ukraine or in Africa somewhere. It's pretty bad shit too. Anyway, I digress. So, fast forward to 2024, Jalisco New Generation is dripping assets into the bay. Drip, 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 drip. And from 2022 to 2024, these people were slowly and quietly moving in and identifying where all the enemy faction would be. Last summer of 2025, the leader of that action pulled the trigger on execution. And June, July of 2025 that just passed, so nearly a year ago, 6 months ago now, 7 months, bodies were dropping around here in the bay at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, not really in broad daylight. nighttime raids in Iraq style of stuff. We know exactly where you are. We're just gonna bust through your window, take your door out, and we're just gonna take you out because we know where you are. So even though there were a few dozen dead bodies around town here, the town didn't shut down. It was just the news. We were unaffected completely because the number one rule for these bad boys are you don't touch the gringos. You don't mess with the tourists at all. Largely, the government even says that to police patrols and stuff around here. If they're gringos, you don't stop them, you don't harass them, you don't search their car. They're on vacation. You just let them go. You just let them do their thing. You don't expose them to that kind of interrogation, searching, scrutiny, etc. You don't do that. So that's the rule. So for all of you people that are propagandized into thinking that every American is in grave danger in Mexico right now, it's just not true. There is something to be said for being wrong place, wrong time. However, the rule is you don't explicitly go after the gringos or the Canadians or the Australians or the British or the Italians or the French. You don't do that. And there has been hefty penalties upon the heads of sicarios or low-end little gangsters that break that rule, and those punishments are death. They'll track them down and kill them. I'll harken back to four U.S. citizens traveling from South Carolina down into Mexico, I believe south of Brownsville and Tamaulipas and Matamoros, were mistaken as rival gang members. Four of them get kidnapped. I believe two were killed, and then it was found out that these were literally just, I believe they were four Black American tourists going into Mexico to get some plastic surgery done. And the next thing they know, they're mistaken for a rival gang, and they get abducted, and then two of them die. And once it was found out that the sicarios that did this screwed up, the boss man of the area gathered those. I believe there was three, maybe three or four sicarios that made this grave mistake. They were cut up into little pieces and with a note left on the windshield of a truck in the streets, with their bodies cut up in the street by this truck, and a note left written in English to the United States government saying, basically, our bad, this is not our practice, we took care of the problem, and here they are, laying on the ground in pieces. We'll never do it again. So yes, bad shit has happened, but they correct it when they know that it's happened. So for any Americans that would like to put anything in comments or have a discussion with me about this or debate me, let's go, bring it on. I will absolutely do it. I'll come to you, you come to me. It would be better if you came to me. I can show you this so you can educate yourself properly to it as well, instead of just listening to some clown talking at you through a screen. Anyway, so there's a little bit of retaliation last year into November and the beginning of December around here for all of the action against the opposing faction that Jalisco was smoking in the middle of the night while we all slept soundly, and we'd just wake up and be like, hey, there's 10 dead bodies up the hill, or 5 dead bodies down the hill, or my friend says, yeah, I got 13 of them here last night. And I mean, it was an operation, man. And You know, it's it was impressive. I really think that there's a lot to the 4 prior U.S. Special Operations troops training these guys. I think there's a lot to that. Because as I said earlier, it was very reminiscent of middle of the night raids in Iraq or Afghanistan. Yes, I know where you sleep. We're gonna roll up, coming in hot, and we're gonna take you out. So that's what they did. I had my legitimate friends in the government here swimming in my pool, complaining to me because they just really don't like these guys. Doesn't matter what group they're with, they just don't like it. They just don't want the cartels in Mexico. They love Donald Trump. They want Donald Trump and the U.S. Army to come down here. And yes, they fucking do. I swear to God. The Mexicans down here are actually quite conservative, and a lot of them really don't want the cartels, and they want the wall because they don't want American criminals coming down here and fucking up their program or their communities. Same reason why we don't want people from the south of our border, criminals coming up into our country. They feel the same way down here. Anyway, so these guys were basically telling me, but I already knew this because my friends up in the mountains were telling me, and by this time I had been allowed in to meet some very spooky folks, some very, very, very high level folks in this organization. So I already knew what was going on, because I'd go up for a beer and a barbecue, and most of these dudes speak English, and they'd just tell me what's going on. We'd shoot guns on the property. I'd show them how to, move a little bit, hold your rifle this way, mount your scope at this address, put your forward grip at this address, walk this way, just kind of like have fun with these guys at the level that I can have fun at, or have fun with. And so they was telling me what's going on, and I just took it to heart, and I just said, okay, well, that's what's happening. And so I'm sitting in my swimming pool with my other very good dear friend and neighbor, actually. He is a very, very important man in the legitimate realm around here. And he has to deal with the government, and he has to deal with the cartels influencing the government. He's swimming in my pool, basically bitching about how, my buddy so-and-so, he made the call to do all this. And, he's, that's why there's so much violence and blah, blah, blah. And now we have to deal with these guys, and we got to be really careful, blah, blah, blah. Well, he was also saying that the new mayor in town, she was raising taxes on all the businesses without negotiation of any of the businesses. This was a no-go, typically. But she held firm and said, nope, we are raising all the taxes this percentage. No questions asked. Raise your prices on the menu, raise your prices on the shelves, no matter what. If it's a registered, legitimate business here in the city of Zihuatanejo, in the county, you're getting higher taxes, period. Well, what was that? Well, that was basically extortion on the highest level. So Jalisco New Generation moves into the mountains, does a 2-year reconnaissance campaign, 2.5-year reconnaissance campaign of this bay, goes in, wipes out the opposing faction, enters in negotiations with the government and says, we've gotten all the low-level criminals out of your town. None of these businesses will be extorted any further from little turds shaking you down at gunpoint. Nobody doing graffiti, tagging, claiming territory, and little scuffles and fights and stabbings and gunshots in downtown, that's done, that's over. But you're going to raise taxes on the businesses, and you're going to give us our cut from those raised taxes. We'll stay in charge. We'll keep this place clean and safe on our end, the shit that your cops and your military can't do, and we'll do it. And in return, you do this. Well, I must say, that plan has worked out precisely the way that they said that it would, up to now. So, I've only seen this town get cleaner, more advanced, less worry at night. There's less carjackings, there's less breaking and enterings, there's less general violence, there's less street fights, there's like no low-level extortion anymore on any of the businesses around town. And that's because that's how this group rolls. They don't go in, they go in, in Tecpan. They went in and they blew that shit up like shock and awe. Again, very reminiscent to Iraq tactics, techniques, and procedures. Very interesting. And they went in a couple of nights and just blew that city to shit. And now it's safer, it's cleaner. They took over that area. Here in Ziwa, blowing the hell out of this place wasn't an option. It's a magical place. It truly is a magical place. And they wanted to keep it as quiet and on the down low as possible, so they did it in that way. And my observation is, and the observation of my wife, my other friends, both local, long-term tourists, 3-monthers, 6-monthers, other residents, expats they all will tell you the same thing. Whatever they did, things are a little bit more expensive here now, but nothing out of reach, nothing obscene. There's less trash on the street. There's almost no wild dogs anymore. The graffiti has all been cleaned up. None of the stores are getting extorted. Building is going on. It's thriving. It's thriving. So, all of my friends, both legitimate and illegitimate, have all done much better for themselves since the group known as CJNG came into this area and basically took control of the area. So, what's next? An organization like Jalisco New Generation has contingency plan after contingency plan. Whacking the lead guy did nothing but start a couple places on fire. Largely, as we sit here Monday afternoon, February 23, the day after the death of El Mencho, largely everything's calmed down throughout the whole country. Nothing ever happened here. Nothing. Absolutely frickin' nothing. The only thing that happened was at people's own want and will, they closed their shops just to be safe and prevent any harm to come to them or their families if there was something of a riot. There were no riots. There was no violence. Nobody is dead on the streets the next day. Nobody's dead on the streets today. The biggest thing that impacted me was the electronics store that I was looking for some of the equipment I wanted for the podcast we're sitting here doing right now was closed. And today, jiu-jitsu is canceled just because everybody's just being a little proactive and hunkering down for one more night. That's the extent that this has affected us where we live. We are still very safe. It's a little bit more rambunctious on my street today because everybody's home. But other than that, everything's fine here. But what's next for the Jalisco New Generation Cartel? Well, the world, Pinky. You know, the Jalisco New Generation combined with the Gulf Cartel and what other little allies they have. I think the Michoacan family is supportive of Jalisco New Generation. There is just no way that the Mexican government and whatever fighting armed forces that they have can stand up to them. They can't. They're not funded, they're not equipped. I have a couple of neighbors on my street. Two of them are designated as members of the Marine Special Forces here in Mexico. I was sitting with my friend and neighbor, the legit guy, talking with one of these Marines, and he basically told me, he's like, yeah, I've got all the training. I know how to dive, I can shoot, I can move, I can communicate, I can drive, but I don't have a vehicle and I don't have a gun. And that's coming from the premier fighting arm of the Mexican military. The government can't even give them proper equipment to fight the fight that they're supposed to be fighting. Meanwhile, there's like shadow economy in the mountains where Dodge TRXs and Ford Raptors and Ram trucks and F-250s and Chevys and 3500s and blah, 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 blah. They go into these garages and they get outfitted with steel plating up armor and better suspension and bigger tires. There's a shadow economy for that here. These guys got it knocked. And so just because you got El Mencho does not mean that this is in any way, shape, or form going to slow anything down. It doesn't mean that. As a matter of fact, I think it's only going to make them stronger and more organized. And they're probably going to be able to conquer more land, take over more municipalities, more local governments. If you, like I said, if you want to go head to head with these guys, the way that the United States of America has done their war fighting, you're just going to hand control over to the bad guys at the end. That's all you're going to do. Because at the end of the day, bad guys are already in charge and they've been in charge. So, what I would like to see, instead of the Trump administration saber rattling with the country of Mexico, our neighbors, that guy sat down with the head of the Taliban, Donald Trump did, and there was a report come out of the CIA after this individual that I mentioned earlier, Piero Rossini, on the Ironclad channel on YouTube, Borderlands show. Piero Rossini basically said he's a former drug trafficker, kingpin kind of guy, I guess. He said that these 4 prior U.S. service members were at the helm of Jalisco New Generation, and that caused a buzz, that caused a stir. And very shortly after that, it came out that in some CIA report or FBI report that the federal government acknowledges this rumor, and they actually know who the 4 people are. And one of the reasons why the U.S. government go after these 4 prior U.S. service members directly is because, could you imagine how that would look politically for largely conservatives, because it's largely conservatives that join the military, when, oh my gosh, look at the, especially under the Joe Biden administration, my God, oh my gosh, these awful white people, these white U.S. soldiers, they're responsible, the conservatives, the Republicans, the blah, they're responsible for the Mexican cartels, they're responsible for Jalisco New Generation. Look, it doesn't matter what contract you sign after you're done running and gunning for the United States of America and the Department of Defense, as it was once called. We don't go and work at Lowe's necessarily. A lot of these guys have they got itchy palms. They need something to do. They need to make money. They're good at one thing. They're good at fighting. And be it Blackwater, French Foreign Legion, or Jet, or name the contractor, the contracting service. These guys go and get paid, $250,000, $300,000 a year, take their own equipment and run a platoon with their own gear, and they're no longer in the military, but they're in the French Foreign Legion. And it's just silly to think that wouldn't happen with a cartel. They got billions of dollars a year, somewhere north. I think they say it's something like anywhere between $3 and $40 billion a year is at least the Jalisco New Generation's income. It's a lot of damn money. You could pay for very highly trained U.S. guys millions of dollars a year, and you could hide them, and they could train your guys, and they would live like kings. And it's just silly to think that that's not what's going on. But I do find it interesting that the tactics of Jalisco New Generation greatly mimic the TTPs that we saw in my generation through Iraq and Afghanistan. Nearly to a T. Pretty interesting. So, I think that Trump should just stop, because killing El Mencho is, it's a hydra. You chop that head off, and 2 more are going to grow. And the problem is Jalisco New Generation is just too large, too organized, too outfitted, It's not a small organization that just kind of fumbles around the mountains with shoddy gear and equipment. It's not. They're gonna react the same way as if a first sergeant of a command or a command sergeant major gets taken out, or a captain or a general or a sergeant first class in your platoon gets taken out, your squad leader gets taken out, the next guy up knows what the mission is. He knows exactly what you're supposed to do. He knows exactly how you're supposed to do it. And he might put his own little spice and flavor on it. But organizations like this don't fall apart when you do what just happened yesterday. So we'll see. Again, please like and subscribe. It means everything to me. Even if you don't want to watch this, like and subscribe anyway. Just don't watch the content. This will go to the bottom of your algorithm. And the biggest inconvenience is you'll see if a new episode comes up. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. And we'll come to you again here in the next couple days with another episode of the Uniquely Unqualified Podcast. Have a great night.